Section 1 in Unit 1, additive inverses and absolute value. So in your textbook, they talk about additive inverses. Well, if you have a number such as, this is additive inverse. If you have a number like 5, the additive inverse is minus 5. If you have a number like minus 10, the additive inverse is plus 10. It's the same value, just the opposite sign. Now, the other thing they talk about is absolute value. And absolute value means it's how far is a number from 0 on a number line. So in your textbook, they'll have an example with absolute value where they say, okay, the absolute value of 2 is 2. So in this case here, locate 0 on the number line. And they're saying, okay, let's locate number 2 on the number line. So what we're saying here is that the absolute value of 2 is 2. In a similar way, if we want to find the absolute value of minus 2, it's how far minus 2 is from 0. Well, minus 2 is also 2 units away from 0. So the key with the absolute value sign is that if you have these vertical bars, they kind of look like brackets or parentheses, but they're not really. They're a grouping symbol. They have the same sort of grouping effect as a bracket or parentheses, but they're different because it means whatever is inside the absolute value sign. You're just being asked to find, well, what's the distance of that quantity from 0? I'm going to do some examples from the exercises at the end of this section. These exercises are not assigned exercises, so let me just show you how to handle questions involving inequalities and some absolute value problems. So first thing to notice, I'm going to do question 54. And the thing I want you to notice here is you've got a double negative there. Now in the text, they talk about the double negative rule. I didn't actually go over that. Essentially, what it means is if you have a double negative, it takes whatever the number is and makes it positive, or takes whatever the variable is and makes it positive. Because what we're saying here really is the first negative sign is really meaning -1. And that's a convention we use in math. If there's just that negative sign and there's no number attached with it, that means it's really -1. So this is -1 multiplied by -2. A negative times a negative is a positive. So let me decode this. What this question number 54 then is saying is that what we're dealing with is we got -8, which is greater than 2, positive 2. That's not true because -8 is to the left of 0. So this is a false statement. Now number 56, again, we have a double negative. So this becomes -6 is less than or equal to +3. Well, that's true because -6 is to the left of 0 and +3 is to the right of 0. So that's true. And now we have an inequality and an absolute value. Well, okay, so you see the vertical brackets here. Those vertical brackets mean absolute value. So this is going to be, I'm going to find the absolute value of -12. Well, what I'm asked here is, how far is -12 from 0? Well, it's 12 units from 0. So I put 12 there. Then there's a less than sign. And -20 is 20 units from 0. So the absolute value of -20 is 20. 12 is less than 20. So that's true. Now I have kind of a mixed operation. So I've got an absolute value sign, which is a grouping symbol. I do what's inside the absolute value sign first. So with number 68, I'm going to write down the negative sign, and then I'm going to find how far the number 12 is from 0. In other words, the absolute value of 12. Well, the absolute value of 12 is 12. But this negative sign's hanging out front. It still stays here. Then I've got an inequality sign, and then I have to find the absolute value of negative 15, which is 15. Is negative 12 greater than 15? No, that is false. Next, in the next question, question 62, I've got another negative sign in front of an absolute value sign. So I write that down first. And then I have the absolute value of negative 12. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. And the question is that less than or equal to? Well, again, I got a negative sign outside of the absolute value signs here. Well, the absolute value of negative 15 is plus 15. Negative 15 is 15 units away from 0. So since the absolute value of negative 15 is 15, I'm going to write that down. And now I have negative 12 is less than or equal to negative 15. That's not true because negative 15 is actually smaller than negative 12. Negative 15 is further away from 0 than negative 12 is. So this is false. And now I have an interesting question. I've got an absolute value sign, and the absolute value sign is acting as a grouping symbol. So I'm actually going to evaluate what's in the absolute value sign first. Here, let me write down the entire question to make it clear. There's the absolute value sign, 13 minus 8, another absolute value sign, less than or equal to 7 minus 4. The absolute value, so I have 7 minus 4. All right, well, I'm going to write down the absolute value signs, and I'm going to evaluate what's inside of them. 13 plus negative 8. More about that later. 13 minus 8 is 5. 7 minus 4 is 3. Now I'm going to evaluate the absolute values. So the absolute value of 5 is 5, less than or equal to. The absolute value of 3 is 3. Well, 5 is not less than 3, so this is false. Okay. I'm going to do one more example that students have problems with. I'm going to talk about number 29D, this one. I'm going to evaluate 29D stepwise. So I'm going to start out with the negative sign on the outside of the absolute value sign. Write down the question the way it appears. Okay, remember the absolute value sign is a grouping symbol. So first off, this negative sign is on the outside of the absolute value sign. Then I'm going to write down the absolute value signs, and now notice I got a double negative right here. Negative times a negative is a positive, so that becomes plus 7. Well, the absolute value of plus 7 is 7, so this is equal to minus 7.